Great. So now I think you can see me as well. So I'm here to talk today about the role of actuaries in climate change. I know you've had a lot of sessions so far talking about the problem of climate change in the world, and I just caught the tail end of a very inspirational session before I started. But just to summarize, climate change is driven by greenhouse gas emissions. We've seen a 1 degree rise since the pre-industrial period. The current path is for potentially a 5 degree rise if no further action is taken. The impacts vary greatly by location. And we have the Paris Agreement to limit the overall rise to quotes well below 2 degrees. And what that means is we have to get on a pathway to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And this is all going to require major policy action with significant societal changes. And this is what COP26 is about. The way the Paris Agreement works is every country makes commitments. Those commitments ratchet up every 5 years. That's what's happening now. But the commitments are all very well. Commitments are just promises. What we need is the action. And we're hoping that one of the results of all this will be action. Now, there's various aspects to this that affect actuaries. Of course, it affects us all in our everyday lives, and that obviously varies by location. We've had a series of webinars from the IFoA where we've been discussing all sorts of things. We've been discussing the impacts on developing nations. We've been talking about insurance. We've been talking about investment. We've been talking about intergenerational fairness, and all those are available on the IFoA YouTube channel. I do encourage you to go off and watch them. But what I'm going to talk a bit about today is actually how this affects us as actuaries. Now, we're risk managers, so we understand all about risk. Well, some about risk anyway. And what we're going to hear, and what we are hearing a lot about from COP26, is mitigation, how we can stop climate change happening or slow it down at any rate. And that is really important. Mitigation is all about our impacts on the climate. It's all about reducing emissions, and it's all about avoiding the unmanageable. We simply cannot manage with 4, 5, even 6 degrees climate change. The world will be impossible for us. However, some climate change is already happening. We're seeing massive weather events around the world. There's drought in Africa, there's bushfires in Australia, there's floods in Europe. Everything we're seeing changing. And that means that we need to adapt to the climate change that is inevitably happening. And this is about the climate's impacts on us, and it's about managing the unavoidable. So we must think as risk managers, as actuaries, about both avoiding the unmanageable and managing the unavoidable. Mitigation is the sexy one, of course, but adaptation is really important for us as we live our lives. And there are 3 main areas where climate risk affects us, anybody. Physical risk, the direct impacts from climate change, all those weather effects, effects on agriculture, effects on health, really important stuff. But there's also the transition risk, the risks from adaptation to mitigation, the risks from changing the way we live our lives to a lower carbon economy. And these risks come out of government policies, they come out of reputational risks. If you're a big corporate and don't do anything about it, your reputation is going to suffer. There's changes in consumer demand. As lifestyles change, companies' business models are going to have to change. We've got the problem of stranded assets. How valuable are coal mines going to be if you can't extract the coal? The same goes for oil reserves. And the third type of risk is liability risk, compensation for the effects of climate change. corporations or governments being held liable for causing climate change. People are being sued, governments are being sued, individual directors are going to be sued for causing climate change or for not considering the impacts. And the not considering the impacts bit could affect actuaries too. If you're a consultant and you're not telling your clients about the possible risks posed to them by climate change, and if those risks materialize and things go horribly wrong for them in 5-10 years' time, they are going to be after you. So we all have to be aware of this in our everyday work. So we've got it. It's a risk management problem. And people talk about climate being a risk, climate change being a risk. Climate change itself is not a risk. Climate change is a certainty. It's happening. We can see it happening. Its impacts pose the risks in both the short and the long terms, through the weather events, through the regulations, starvation, mass migration, civil unrest, changes to consumer demand, business models, financial systems, and the economy. So we can't ignore the risks. We can't ignore the risks. We have to think about them in our work. If you're advising an insurance company or working for an insurance company, you should be thinking about how climate change, the risks posed by climate change, might affect it. So at the IFoA, we have a policy, we have a fairly strong policy statement about what the profession should be doing. We specialize in risk management. It's important for us to think about this risk, and it's important for us to help the world mitigate the risk. We should also be serving our clients. So our actuaries should be treating climate risk as a primary risk. We should think about climate risk, climate-related risk, at the same level as we think about mortality risk, as we think about interest rate risk. Now, not all risks are relevant to all pieces of work, but where it is relevant, we should be thinking about it. We're including climate risk in our core exams. We're providing a lot of lifelong learning resources so the people who finish the exams can learn about climate risk. You can't stop learning once you finish the exams. We've got practical guides for actuaries in various fields of work. We've got a curated library. We're starting a sustainability certificate early next year, and it's an active area of research for us. So we're trying to do all we can at the IFoA to help actuaries adapt to this new world where climate risk is important. And many of these resources, all of these resources are free to our members, and many of them are available to everybody. We're seeing a lot of changes in the business and regulatory environment for actuaries. Increasingly around the world, financial regulators are increasing their emphasis on climate risk. We're seeing mandatory financial disclosures coming in. A lot of places are now having to do TCFD disclosures, and we're seeing a huge rise in ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance. You could say that this is just a fad, that it's a fashion, it's a flash in the pan, and much of it is, I'm afraid, just greenwashing. People trying to say the right words, but not changing their actions. But actually, actions are happening, and increasingly it's going to be actions that the regulators in particular are looking for. So this is changing the way actuaries work. It's changing what we have to think about. So you could see that as a problem, but I prefer to see it as a huge opportunity. Financial regulators are asking financial services institutions to think about this type of risk. And actuaries have a head start on this. It's a new type of risk. Nobody's terribly familiar with it, but we have a head start because we have been thinking about it for some time. We have got some of the tools and techniques, scenario analysis, for example. I mean, one of the problems is that there isn't data because climate change hasn't happened before. It's not a repeatable risk. It's not going to happen again. So we have to use our data in different ways. But we actuaries can rise to this challenge. We can think about how to do it. And we can do this in different fields. We don't have to limit ourselves to insurance. In banking, for example, it's a problem for bankers too, and they haven't had to do this sort of thing before. So we as actuaries can help them there. So what can we actually do? Well, risk management. Obviously, we're skilled at risk management. All sorts of different types of risk are going to be affected by climate change, by the transition. And remember, either the world changes because we don't do anything, climate change happens and everything goes completely to pot, or the world changes because we do something, we mitigate, we go to a low carbon economy and we get transition risk. So either way, there's risks to think about, there's changes to think about, and there's opportunities for us to use our tried and tested techniques and to develop new techniques to handle these new types of risks. We are increasingly good at data analytics. We can do survival analysis. We can do scenario analysis. All these things we can bring to bear on this risk that is so important for the world. So that's what we can do. What should we do? And this is really important. We should really help our employers and clients to understand the relevant risks, especially the investment risks, for example, and the existential risks. By existential risks, I mean, is there a role for an insurance company, for example, as it exists now, in a world where the average global temperature has risen by 4 degrees? Many people think not. People think that a 4-degree world is uninsurable. In that case, should insurance companies be doing something to preserve their future? Should they be working in order to mitigate climate change? Or should they be supporting the practices that are going to change the climate and put them out of business? Something to think about there. Actuaries should also grasp the new opportunities. There's a changing risk landscape out there. This means that we need new insurance products. We need insurance products that serve policyholders of whoever they are, people, society, in this changing risk landscape. It's often said that insurance is society's risk manager. Well, we need to step up to that challenge and think about what that means with the new risks coming on board, with the lifestyle changes. What are people going to need in the way of risk management? And we can also help the world. We as actuaries, with our clear view of risk management and the fact that you have to look at all the range of possibilities as a risk manager. You can't just look at what you think is likely to happen. You have to think of the full range of possibilities, what could happen. So we have to support and encourage climate mitigation and adaptation through financial services products. Develop products that encourage people to reduce their carbon emissions. Develop products that encourage people to adapt to climate change. We have to analyze and discuss the implications of climate change so people realize what's really happening and can do the right thing. So in many ways, this is the biggest business and career opportunity in several lifetimes. Huge change afoot, actuaries well placed to help the world and to, if you like, have good careers and fantastic business opportunities for their employers too. So it's not all doom and gloom, Okay, it's doom and gloom if we don't do anything. If we step out there, step up to the mark and do what we can, it's a fantastic opportunity for us, both in our personal lives and our business lives and so on, but also to help the world. So that's the message I'd like to leave you with.
Maybe the questions for Dr. Louise Pryor? Yeah? Oh, yes. Elias.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, yesterday we did launch a task force on ESG, and one of the key things that as FSD Africa, we're looking to see how we could plug into the task force maybe that has been set at IFoA. So are there avenues that we could maybe organize a way to partner with IFoA based on the task force that have been set? And basically this is guided by the Actuarial Society of Kenya with the support of Financial Sector Deepening Africa and other partners. So I just wanted to know whether there are the avenues in which we could partner with the task force on the other end.
Absolutely, there are. We have a group of volunteers, our sustainability board, that coordinate our activities in that area. Nick Spencer, the next speaker, is the immediate past chair of that board and is still heavily involved with it. And if you get in touch with either me or Nick, we can put you in touch with the right people. And it sounds like a great thing that I'm sure we'd love to be involved in.
Thank you, Madam President, for your speech. We really appreciate your time. And I think with that, I think we'll give a clap and then we go to the next session.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been great.